Welcome to VerftetPOD. On this podcast, we try to spark your curiosity by talking about exciting subjects or interviewing high achievers in the fitness industry. For you to make sense of this, we use a structure of what you need to know, what is nice to know, and principles to apply. I am Thaddeus, the head coach of CrossFit Werftet. His name is Andreas, the owner of CrossFit Werftet. And in today's episode, we'll talk about injuries. In this conversation, we'll let you know a thing or two about what an injury is, how you might be able to approach an injury with the same fanatism that you use to approach your training, and what some good things are to consider or good questions are to ask to anybody that might help you recover from an injury. Here we go.
Hello everyone.
Hello.
We're back. Today we're having injury as a theme. We're going to talk a bit about the training into injuries, CrossFit specifically, but also general movement. I am going to be the idiot in the conversation with Thaddeus as my company. So Thaddeus knows a lot more than me about this. So I'm going to try to make more sense out of it for myself. And hopefully our listeners also will make more sense out of the themes we talk about. We're going to look into, are we safe when we do CrossFit, or should we do something else? And we're going to have a high nerdiness factor on this podcast. So we're going to try to make it interesting for the semi-nerds also, not only the big nerds. So Thaddeus, what is an injury?
That's a good question, right? There's a huge risk of going on a big nerd safari here because I've been studying human movement and injuries for the past, or for about 10 years in university, and then switched to coaching CrossFit. So I'm kind of in both worlds, right? The exercise science and medical world, or the coaching world.
And that for our listeners is very unique in terms of if we transfer to how many other people in the world at the moment who has that, both of those backgrounds. It's not many people. So you have interesting background that not a lot of people have. That's also why it's interesting to talk about this with you.
Yeah. I don't know how many.
Hopefully, it's going to be interesting.
I feel like a pretty special unicorn, so maybe that's good for some.
Me too.
You asked me what is an injury, right?
Yes.
And the funny part is, just like CrossFit's definition of fitness, right? Work capacity across broad time and modal domains. That makes sense.
For someone, probably not everyone, but yes.
I went looking for a definition of an injury, and there is not one that really stands out to me as a definition of injury that's applicable, that's usable in a lot of different settings. So I went looking, and there's a few studies being done relating to injuries in CrossFit in specific, and they use different definitions, right? One is from a study by Huck, and they define an injury as an injury sustained during training that prevented the participant from training, working, or competing in any way and for any period. So basically, if you're hurt and you can't do your training, which might be CrossFit, you're injured. The definition is a bit wrong, because if we were to apply this definition to a ball, the definition would be a ball is a ball that you can use to throw and kick and maybe sit on. Like, it doesn't tell us what it is. So that's not really workable. Then in 2019, there was another study done by a Dutch guy named Merap, and they talk about a musculoskeletal injury, so an injury to your muscles or your skeleton, right? They're not talking mental injuries now or any nerve injuries. That's outside of the picture. And they say, well, a musculoskeletal injury is any new musculoskeletal pain, feeling, or discomfort as a result of a CrossFit workout that met one of the following criteria. Criteria 1, total removal from CrossFit training and other outside routine physical activities for more than 1 week. Criteria 2, modification of normal training activities in duration, intensity, or mode for more than 2 weeks. And criteria 3, any physical complaint severe enough to warrant a visit to a health professional. So instead of saying an injury is an injury, they specify it, and they add the domain of time. Does it last more than 1 week or 2 weeks? And they add the severity, right? Is this worrying you so much that you're going to look for help? Which is better. It's a more specified definition, but I still don't think it's really workable, because if I have to adapt my training less than a week, let's say for 5 days, am I then not injured in those 5 days?
In that definition, you're not.
Yeah. Or, right, if I don't modify my training for more than 2 weeks, in the first 13 days that I am modifying my training, am I then not injured? But do I become injured on day 15?
I think most of the people, if they come in on day 1 and they have to modify something, they feel at least maybe injured.
Yeah.
So maybe waiting 13 days will feel different for some people.
So that's another definition, and they set this up for the research study, right? But I don't think they're very applicable in the real world. The best definition I found comes from the Ready State, what used to be Mobility Watt by Kelly Starrett, who's an American physiotherapist.
Known in the CrossFit world.
He used to be a box owner, right? He done some good work and has a long track record. They say, well, you're injured if you have all 3 criteria. Criteria 1, there's a clear mechanism of injury. In the medical world, we call that a mode of onset, right? How did you get injured? Criteria 2, pathology occurs. So something is broken or something is torn. And pathology, you can back that up by doing diagnostics, right? By taking a picture or a scan or a lab result.
And see if it's something on the picture that's off.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And criteria number 3, you cannot fulfill your role in work, society, or family. So no time domains there, but it's also outside the gym. Now, I think this last definition is most applicable in the real world, and therefore I like to stick to that framework when we're talking about what is an injury. Well, it's something where we found out how it got there. We can back it up by diagnostics that something is wrong or off, and that you cannot fulfill your role in work, life, or society. That role can be, I cannot train the way I want to, but it can also be, I cannot pick up my kid and put him in bed, or I cannot go to work because I have a physical job and I cannot bend over at the moment.
Yeah, and if you then don't know what happened, is it then not an injury?
Yeah. Well, I think it's very worthwhile to pick your words wisely, because they influence how you think about that problem, whether it's an injury or not, and eventually how you approach it or what you will do with it or to it. So for me, the word injury implies that there's something serious going on, or maybe even sinister going on. The word incident or stiffness or a little ache or pain implies that it's not perfect, but that I am perfectly capable of doing something to it or about it myself, right? It puts you in a proactive mode of thinking, and I really like that.
Yeah.
Because a lot of CrossFit athletes, even if they only train twice a week, approach that training in a quite serious way, right? You might have a daytime job, but you approach training like a professional athlete might do.
Yeah.
I don't see a lot of people go to a tennis court and then drinking a specific drink before they go training, taking care of their food and nutrition.
Nocco, is that what you're trying to refer to?
Maybe, or a Fit Aid or a protein shake or just some plain old water, right?
Yeah.
But I don't see a lot of those athletes that only do 2 hours of sports in a week prepare and live and try to do as good as they can during that sporting activity. They're just there to have fun, move around a little bit, and then have a chat with the people they're playing tennis against.
Yeah.
But I see very black and white, right? I see housewives showing up with lifters, knee sleeves, a belt, a Nocco, taking some C4 pre-workout, and then making sure they sleep enough to get the most out of their CrossFit training. Yeah. If you're that dedicated to your training and its results, how about you're equally as dedicated to your health or fitness or injury and what allows you to train and get results from your training?
Yeah. So what you're saying is that instead of focusing that much on only the lifters and the knee sleeves, looking at how much time you use to take care of your body, is that?
Yeah, definitely, right? You should not spend all your money on fancy toys and not spend any of your time and attention on what you could get out of training.
Yeah.
Right? It should be on a similar level, at least. Otherwise, you're missing something.
Yes, and then we're also on the topic then of something we talked about before in this podcast, as I'm going to bring up afterwards also, like being in the long-term game of looking into how you move in 10 years instead of what you snatched yesterday. Doing stuff that's not very sexy, for lack of better terms. Maybe, like we're going to talk about today, can invest in long-term good results.
Yeah, sustainability, right? You should be moving in 20 years from now and not just be moving today.
Yes, and if you're 25 years old and you can't bend down because your knee hurts, we have to work on something.
Yeah. I don't think that should be the norm that we're striving for.
No. Okay, so if we look into an example of an injury, if we go there, we can use me as an example. In the terms of I had one. I have not had many injuries. I've done CrossFit for 10 years, and the only kind of injury that set me back is my groin. And hip flexors from doing too much back squats, kind of.
Could be.
So how can I approach if I'm going from in that was when I competed in CrossFit, so going from a back squat that was 160 kilo to a back squat that was 80 kilos, and it hurt. And it was weak, the leg was weak. Like, what do I do?
So following any of the three definitions that we talked about, that would be an injury, right? Because it limits your training or your training capability, it hurts, you feel weak, right? All bases are covered there. What I would do in your case is first consider, what might have happened, and do I feel capable of attacking this, of working on this to get better by myself, or do I need help? Right. So the funny thing is, those definitions of injury came from studies on injuries in CrossFit athletes. The numbers are quite conflicting. So the first study, with a very big and wide definition for what an injury is, found an amount of injuries. But the second study narrowed down the definition of what an injury is, which makes me expect we're going to find less. They found more injuries in CrossFit. Right? So that's a bit conflicting. And if you say, I've been doing CrossFit for 10 years and this is one of the injuries I can think of, but I haven't had that many, that's quite a good track record. To do a sport for 10 years, be competitive in it, so that means pushing and spending quite a few hours there, and only running into a few injuries. Now back to your groin or hip flexor, right?
Yes.
You used to squat 160, and now you can squat half of that, 80 kilos, with pain in your groin or in your hip flexor. All right, that's limiting you in what you would want to do or like to do. Can you train around it by only doing ring rows and sit-ups? Probably you can.
Yes, I can.
Will that speed up your recovery or improve what you feel in your groin or your hip? No. So any trainer, right, with a lot of credentials or with no credentials at all, can help you train around an injury. You can still move and therefore feel good, or sweat a little bit, or don't gain any weight, or get all these beautiful perks out of training.
Yes, and also in that terms, a little outside of the side safari before we go back into the case. Also, they're looking into like if the groin, we can like a story of it's game season. Brent Fikowski hurt it is his hip the same way. The year he didn't qualify for the games, and that story was in the way that he didn't qualify. He hurt his groin, so he couldn't train that or have to avoid that for 6 months. Instead of kind of crying and not doing anything, he worked a lot on upper body strength, and that was his main weakness. So when he came back the next year, he went on the podium at the CrossFit Games. So my out of the world there also is, if something bad happens, you can turn it around and you can make it into, okay, now I'm going to focus on something else, and now I can of course play with the cards you have at hand. I think is important in life and in training.
Yeah, it absolutely is, right? And this is a great example of using that time when you're injured to fill up some other skills that might be lacking for you.
Fitness holes or whatever.
Yeah.
Back to my case,
Yeah, all right. So any coach or trainer can train around your injury, and that will keep you moving but not help you progress really soon. I use a framework of thinking, and I'll write this out and we can put it in the show notes, right? So people can follow along. But that framework starts on the top with a personal problem. In your case, that's groin and hip pain while squatting.
Yeah.
There's two separate lines of reasoning how I go about thinking about an injury like that. The first line of reasoning is logical reasoning. It has to make sense to you, me, your doctor, your aunt, and a judge in court.
Yeah. So 4 people have to make sense out of it.
Everybody should make sense of it. This is about facts and figures, right?
Yeah.
What we're looking for are 7 points then in order to recognize a pattern, because that's what we all do. Whether you're a therapist or a doctor or a trainer, you're looking for a pattern. Yep. The movement pattern of squatting is that you start standing tall, your hips go back and down. We coach people to drive their knees out, and then you stand back up. Yep. Right? The movement pattern or the injury pattern for groin injuries, there's 4 distinct types of groin injuries that are most common. So in my head, but that's a therapist's mind, I would at least consider those 4 options and maybe do a specific test for it. But now I'm getting too far ahead.
Yeah.
I'm saying we're doing logical reasoning and we're looking for 7 elements of a pattern to recognize. Yeah. We don't have to recognize the full pattern, but at least we're going to try to get close to it. Yeah. 7 elements. Here they come. Number 1 is epidemiology. That means what sex are you, male, female, or I don't want to talk about it.
That makes a lot more sense than epi something.
Yeah. And how old are you?
Yeah.
There are specific injuries that only happen at a young age or at a higher age. Yeah. There are specific injuries that happen way more in women than in guys. So we need to take that into account, right? You're a full-grown human being. You're not going to get a kid's injury.
No.
Or it's very rare.
Yeah.
Second aspect there is the mode of onset. That relates back to the definition we had, right? You only break a leg by a high energetic trauma. Nobody breaks a leg while they're sleeping.
No.
In bed laying still, right? It's also quite rare to roll your ankle while you are playing chess. So that needs to make sense. The third aspect of that pattern recognition is the course of your problem or injury over time. So usually when you damage something, it hurts at an instant, but the pain slowly fades a bit over the course of a few days, and it doesn't fully disappear.
No.
It would be weird if I roll my ankle today and the pain keeps increasing over the next 5 days. That's a completely different course of action. So that's something to take into consideration. Then the fourth factor is provocation. What can you do? What posture or position or where can you press or stretch to provocate whatever it is you're feeling to be stiff or more painful? And the fifth one is what can you do to reduce it, right? Can you ice it? Can you not move it? Does it feel better after 10 minutes of moving? Does it feel better after you stretch it? These are all valuable information pockets for me to recognize a pattern of what's going on. Now there's 2 more. Number 6 is objective signs, and this comes to logical reasoning, what you, me, your doctor, and the judge can see. If you break your leg and your shin is now at a 90-degree angle, we can all see what is going wrong. Yep. Right? If we watch Rafa Nadal play tennis, he's a left-handed tennis player at the elite level. His left bicep is mucho bigger than the right one. We can all see that. It's an objective sign.
Yep.
7th, and that's the hardest one to put into words for people, subjective symptoms. So I feel stiff, or I feel tight, or my arm feels numb, or I feel weaker.
And what is weak and what is tight and what is...
Turns out a lot of times that's nothing more than a feeling, right?
Yes.
If you feel weak, but we strength test the left leg compared to the right one, the difference is not that big. By the way, they're hardly ever identical, even in people without pain or injury.
Yes.
So the total information gathering of those 7 things, how old are you, what sex are you, what's the mode of onset, what provocates your symptoms, what reduces your symptoms, what is then objective for everybody to see, and what's subjective for you to feel, the total sum of that leads to, this might be injury X or Y or Z, right? If we talk about your groin injury, it might be a groin injury related to the adductors, the muscles that are in your groin, which is the most common.
So what do I do?
So what do you do? If you cannot figure this out by yourself, you need help. Who's the easiest to get help from and who is knowledgeable here? That might be your family doctor. That might be your coach. That might be a physiotherapist, chiropractor, shaman. I don't care what they do. They need to be knowledgeable and credible in this, right? In order to help you.
And if you go to the family doctor who's never ever moved his whole entire life, how would that look?
Yeah, so they probably have a hard time relating to you, right? The total information they collect, these 7 parts of a pattern, lead them to consider, do we need any diagnostics, and what kind of diagnostics do we need? So if we're talking a true pathology, if we're talking a true injury, a broken leg, everybody knows we need an x-ray.
Yeah.
But maybe if the leg or the toe is not fully broken but just cracked, you're better off having a CT scan. That's why we need the medical knowledge to decide, I think injury X is going on, and the diagnostics we need are this test or that picture.
Yeah, because my question also goes to, like, in Norway, it's very normal. If anything is wrong, you go to your family doctor about everything.
Yeah.
And if your family doctor doesn't understand what squatting motion should look like, is it then the family doctor you should go to, or is it somebody else?
Yeah. Well, in any profession, right? For us as coaches, but for family doctors as well, there's really good coaches. But there's also some really bad coaches. Yes. How do you recognize a bad coach or a bad doctor? By leaving a meeting feeling, that wasn't perfect. I'm not saying your family doctor is bad, but I do want him or her to kind of get in your head and relate to what things are that you think are important. So by collecting all that information, they will decide, do we need a test, and what test do we need? A lot of people think if I just get an MRI scan, we'll find everything, which is not true. We can find a lot of stuff on an MRI scan that has been there for years and has not bothered you.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. So we're not only looking at the picture, we're looking at the picture and the story of the patient. Now, whatever test we do, we can then ask the question, how sure are we of our findings? And there are statistical numbers here, right? Or a positive likelihood or a negative likelihood from any test. That if we make an x-ray and we see a broken bone, I'm pretty sure it's a broken bone.
Yeah.
If we take an MRI scan and I see some inflammation in a tendon, is that new? Is that what is causing your pain, or has it been there forever?
Yeah.
Right? Funny thing is, if we take MRIs of people's shoulders and we look at the non-injured side, we often find as many abnormalities or weird findings as we do in the injured shoulder.
Yeah.
Why is the one hurting and the other one not? We don't know. So collect a pattern, do a diagnosis or do some diagnostics, figure out how sure are we, and if it's a pathology, the problem you have is more important than the person that has it. By that I mean, if your leg is really broken, you need to be in a cast for it to heal. Doesn't matter if you're a CrossFitter or an ultramarathon runner or a chess player.
Yeah. But and my groin, what do I do?
Yeah. So your groin, all right, we need to collect the data and then do a diagnosis. So those 4 main types of groin injuries that we talked about, there's a few very simple physical tests you can do to discern between them, to decide which one it might be and which one it might not be.
Yeah.
Concluding there, if it is an adductor-related groin injury, which is the one that occurs the most, right? It's related to your adductors, the muscles in there. The easiest way to treat that would be to train them. And training starts at a basic level and finishes at the level where you would like to train, 160 kilo back squat.
Yeah, 165, of course.
65, sorry, man, to break your PR now. So if you want to get back to that 165 and even PR at 166,
yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah.
You need somebody to help you that understands the basic level of how do I start this and how do I fill in the gap getting back to your old training regimen or PR.
Yeah, because I also see, like with my groin, I also see a lot of, the normal thing to do is also, I'm going to stay at home because I hurt, and then I'm going to wait it out, and now it doesn't hurt anymore, and I can start back up again.
Yeah.
What is most efficient? Is that more efficient than going for help?
Right, that might be the case, right? But that depends on the specifics. So for these groin injuries, if we, for instance, put an ultrasound or an MRI scan on that adductor, which is injured in our perspective, we oftentimes don't find anything weird. But it still hurts.
Yes.
So that would mean you do not have a pathology because we cannot back up an objective sign. We're only left with subjective symptoms of pain and weakness.
Yeah.
Maybe the weakness is an objective sign, right? If you're not moving 160 but 80. But that's the only thing that's left. Is that enough to say, all right, this is the full pattern? No, it's just a part of it.
Yeah.
So I said there were 2 lines of reasoning, starting in a personal problem, logical reasoning, 7 aspects of a pattern. The other line of reasoning is called narrative reasoning.
Yeah.
That narrative reasoning means it is the story you tell yourself. It is what you believe is going on, and what you think or believe leads to what you feel, leads to your emotions, but eventually your behavior, what you're going to do. And an example of that behavior is you rest it for a couple of weeks, and then you start building it up again. Will that help you? Probably.
Yeah.
Will it get you back to 160 and 166 as soon as possible? Maybe not.
Yeah. So what you're saying is,
So
yeah,
in that line of narrative reasoning, there's a human interaction. Is your family doctor good at human interaction in a 5-minute consult? Or is your coach better suited to do that if he sees you for 5 hours a week? Even though your coach might not have the medical background, right?
Yeah.
The things we should discuss then are called your illness beliefs. So a doctor named Leventhal coined this. There's 5 themes or 5 questions you might answer. The first one is about identity. So what is going on? Well, you mentioned that you have a groin injury. What kind of groin injury? That's not in your head yet, but I know that it might be one of 4.
Yeah.
Second thing is, what's causing it? You said, well, I back squatted too much. I interpret that as you back squatted too often or too much weight. But I haven't heard you, or both, yeah. I've seen your legs, 160 is too much. No. But I haven't heard you say, I did this one squat and then I fell down and the barbell crashed on me, right? There's not a clear accident, which was in the criteria from TRS, the ready state or mobility one for an injury.
Correct.
Third question you might ask is, all right, what's happening on the timeline? How long has this taken, or how long will it take for me to get back? You haven't said anything, but I know from our personal interactions that it took longer than you would like to.
Of course.
Which is almost always the case with any.
Yes.
Fourth topic is controllability. Are you in control of what happens? Well, by resting, you take some control, and then by slowly building it up, you take some control. But how do you build it up? Is that just by squatting, or do you add something to it? And by adding something, I don't mean working around it, push-ups and pull-ups and sit-ups. I mean addressing that area that hurts or that movement pattern.
So what you're saying is that when my groin hurts, doing air squats is maybe a thing I can do.
Like it's something you should at least consider.
Yeah.
Yeah. And try if nobody's helping you, right? It makes sense, so try it.
Yeah, so in my case then, with my groin, is that... So if I start going into the gym and I can do air squat pain-free, even though it's the movement that hurted me, that is something that's going to come, that's going to be valuable for me to do?
Probably, yes.
Yes.
Fifth question they have is about curability. Are you able to recover from this, or is this a life sentence? Right?
Yeah.
My hip is worn out. Yeah, that's kind of going to stay worn out until you get an artificial one, right? Until you become RoboCop. So I don't like the term worn out, because even if your cartilage is worn out or not perfect on the images, there's probably still a lot you can do, right? I've worked with people with worn out knees and hips that still squat well over their body weight and run marathons. Yep. That is possible. The question becomes, do you still want to or need to do that? So that's something you should narratively talk to with another human being. And there's one very big factor there, and that is you have to orientate yourself. You have to get an idea of if there is any continuous dysregulating stress. So I don't mean, I forgot to write down a loaf of bread on my shopping list and now I didn't bring it. That's not stressful enough, right? We're talking life events. Is somebody in your close circle really unhealthy, maybe dying? Are you in a divorce? Did you just burn down your house? Did you lose all your money? Is there a worldwide pandemic? Is there a lot of pressure on you at work and therefore you're always stressed or not sleeping? Are you depriving yourself of quality sleep or nutrients you might need? That is like a magnifying glass for any type of pain or discomfort.
Yeah, so that the head is attached to the body.
Absolutely. And as a therapist or as a coach, I might not be able to take away that stress, but I am perfectly able to say, hey, Andreas, you might not be in tip-top shape right now. Do you think you should be on your back squat? Right? The simple question, how are you doing? And not, fine, how are you? No, how are you really doing? That's a profound one. right? But you need time and a human connection to get a true answer there.
Yeah. But if we look into my injury, if I go to somebody that can help me.
Mm-hmm.
Should I move with pain? Should I wait until I'm pain-free before moving?
The answer there is...
definition of what is the definition of pain that we can talk about. Like, what's painful for me? Is that painful for you?
Yeah.
What is the balance there with pain and not pain?
Yeah. So
because
in the medical world,
I know we have some science of moving with pain per definition can speed up the recovery time.
Yeah.
Is that true?
Yes. But it depends is the full answer.
Yes.
So in the medical world, we like to gauge pain, and we do that by asking you, can you rate your pain on a scale from 0 to 10 or 0 to 21, right?
Yeah.
I think that's a weird thing to do because pain is multidimensional. I have to put into words what I'm feeling. So, for instance, I never get home and then I scream up the staircase, "Hey, honey, on a scale from 0 to 10, how much do you love me today?"
You're down at 2 points.
Maybe if I did something bad, right?
But
if she says a 7, she might consider that 7 as,
that's nice.
That's quite okay. It's more than enough. And I'm like, only a 7?
Yeah.
I brought flowers and chocolate, and I really...
Yeah.
Only a 7,
I
right?
did everything I could.
Pain perception is 100% subjective. It is in you, and if you try
to
express it in words to somebody else, how they understand it is different than what you mean.
Yes, that's what I mean. But
so
to the
should
point,
you move
question.
in the presence of pain? It depends.
Yeah.
If you have the pathology of a broken leg and it hurts you, I don't think you should load that broken leg before it has healed.
No.
If you have a groin injury where we think there's some pain originating from the groin muscles, the adductor muscles, we know from trying different approaches that getting it moving is one of the quickest ways to heal. So then,
get blood flow.
You should move in the presence of pain.
Yeah.
But you should probably not torture yourself so that you're in more pain afterwards.
So if
and
we,
that thing
if
you
we base,
mentioned of creating blood flow, we used to think that is a really important thing, but we're not that sure.
No. Nobody's sure about nothing in this world, but
Yeah.
if we're gonna make sense out of something, moving creates blood flow, and moving can speed up the process.
Yeah, but use common sense, right?
Yes.
If squatting is really painful
yeah.
and riding a bike feels better, I would start by riding the bike.
That's my point. So if if in this case back squat was the case, that hurted, but I can do heavy lunges and it feels completely fine.
Go, man.
Yes. Go bananas.
Yeah.
Yes. Good. I got my point forward.
So you're injured, right? Now what? Well, we often think that science has all the answers to how we should approach this injury. And we do in some distinct cases where there is a pathology with objective signs and it's very easy to recognize the pattern.
Yeah.
But we do not in most other instances. Then it becomes a bit of trial and error, right? I have tried this before and then it worked. Or we have some studies suggesting that this might be. Well, so now we need help from somebody who has done or who's up to speed on those studies, who knows a thing or two. And that's continuously evolving the body of evidence, so you're never done learning.
No.
Right? So a doctor with 20 years of experience can be a really good doctor unless he got a degree and then stopped learning for 20 years.
Yeah,
your coach can be a very experienced coach, but is he an expertise coach at this subject?
And that's the 10,000 hour rule that came into liberate practice other than practice. Like everybody has driven a car for 10,000 hours. We're not going to Formula 1, even though everybody thinks they could, including me.
Yeah.
But the deliberate practice on a Formula 1 field for 10,000 hours can make you a Formula 1 driver.
Exactly.
And that's the same with a doctor and with a coach and with everything. It's not about the time, it's about the focus in the time you're using.
Mm-hmm. So if you're injured, we're looking for some experience or some expertise to help guide you along the way into the right direction and maybe even the quickest direction, right? If you're serious about your sport, we want to get there quick.
Because that's my point. Like, if we look into the type of injury that I had, I would say that at one point the groin would be okay again and I could move again. Mm-hmm. But what I'm interested in is that I want to join my 8:45 gang or 6 o'clock gang or 4 o'clock gang as quick as possible.
Yeah.
So I can get back as quick as, because that's what I want. If something gets off, that's boring. I want to get back on the horse.
Yep. So we're then talking less about the groin, but more about you as a person and your role in that 8:45 gang,
Yes.
right? Your role in the gym, or your hour to blow off some steam, or your hour
Get
to
out
escape,
of the house.
The family or the work or whatever it is, which is really important.
Yeah.
Right. If you take training seriously, you should take understanding science seriously as well.
Yeah.
And a lot of newbies there think that studies have shown that this treatment option is the best, or this product is the best. That's not how science works. Science starts out with a hypothesis, with an idea. So let's say we have a groin injury, and we used to treat that by taking 6 months of rest. That's the normal mode of care. But now
that's a normal answer of a doctor. Go home and rest.
And now we found this great machine in a Globo gym, the innie and outie machine, right? You sit in there and then you push your knees out. So you open your legs, or you turn the pillows and you push your knees in. Right? Apparently, there's a demographic of people that really like to train on the innie and outie machine.
Yeah.
I'm not part of that. But hey, let's say we put you on the innie and outie machine on a protocol for 2 months, and then you recover quicker. Does that mean that the innie and outie machine is the treatment for all groin injuries? No. It just means that compared to 6 months of doing nothing,
it's better.
The innie and outie machine might speed up your recovery. Go and try it.
Yeah.
But if it doesn't speed up your recovery, stop doing it. Find something else. Right? So science is not about this works. Science is about we know that this is not the best option.
Yeah.
So there's always some experimenting in there, and that experimenting is decided by what your injury is it a pathology, yes or no, who you are, and what do you think is important or fun to do.
Yeah.
So if we tell a CrossFitter, you got to spend 12 weeks on the innie and outie machine, he's like, hell no. I'd rather do push-ups and sit-ups for 12 weeks with the 8:45 gang and work my way around it.
Yes.
Fine. Good solution for you.
Yes.
But it might take you longer before you're squatting 165.
And
That's part of the conclusion.
Yes.
So if we look at treating an injury, oftentimes we are not sure, but you should experiment with something that fits you. And if we look at how do injuries occur, or what should I stop doing in order to get it back again, the judges are still out, right? Science is not conclusive there. So to give you an example, there are plenty of studies showing you that if you sleep less than 7 hours a night, the chance of you getting injured becomes a lot bigger.
Yes.
But if
I
we
feel
look
fine when I sleep 5 hours.
Yeah, but if we look at a meta-analysis, right, piling all the scientific studies we've done together, and there's a study done in 2021, I'll link it in the show notes, that shows, well, we're not that sure. They don't think you can include a loss of sleep as the only risk factor for getting an injury, and there's some conflicting evidence going on. I feel better when I sleep enough compared to when I sleep too little. So I'm still going to be on the safe side and try to get enough sleep, but it's probably not the only single factor influencing injury.
It's just like saying if you eat nutritious food, you're healthy for life.
Yeah.
It's not one answer to healthiness, and it's not one answer to nothing.
Yeah. Another big risk factor for injuries is overuse, right? So doing more than you can handle, or doing it more often, or with higher loads or higher speed, or at ranges of motion that you're not prepared for. That's
I've not done before.
Yeah, that's fun, but then start off by being a beginner and doing a general program and slowly make it more specific.
Yes, and I have an example there on when I did a lot of weightlifting training in Bergen and did a specific weightlifting class. Also there, the weightlifting coach, which had won the Norwegian Championship 8 times in a row, started making us doing deadlifts where we kind of got the barbell underneath our elbow. So you had to do the deadlift with the worst form in the world.
Yeah.
And the beginning, you're like,
deadlifts or squats?
Deadlifts. So you're putting it up from the ground with a bad back.
Wow. Yeah.
And then you're like, but we know are supposed to have a straight back. We never learned this.
Yeah.
And the answer was that, okay, if you're gonna catch a clean, the heaviest clean that you ever got, and then your back is going out of the nice straight back that you always trained. Your back is not used to being in another way than the straight line.
So he's introducing some variety to your training.
Yes, and of course it was in a safe loading, and not in a crazy loading, but training other stuff than the typical thing that we do can also be out of value.
Yeah.
But we're getting into something else, Tadeusz. Anything else before we put out some principles for the listeners to summarize?
Well, I think a great summary for you as a athlete or as a patient if you get injured.
And every person is an athlete.
Is to stick to 3 solid questions, right? If you're in pain and you need help, ask whoever is helping you what's going on.
Yeah.
What's the diagnosis?
And find someone you trust.
Yep.
Yeah.
And if you want to dig a little deeper there, question 1B becomes what's going on? How sure are you of this? Is it just a guess? Do we have something to back it up? Right.
Yeah.
Question number 2 is, all right, so if this thing is going on, you have a groin injury, what treatment options do we have? Do I rest? Do I get in a training program? Do you manipulate my lower back, right? Do you get some colorful tape? Do we get some suction cups? Do we prick some needles? And that's oftentimes you have to ask that question and think outside of the box, literally and figuratively. Not just inside the CrossFit box, but if you ask your family doctor what treatment options are there, it's not just about what can that family doctor do, what can other medical providers do than the family doctor, right? He is the center of or he's the hub in the wheel with all the spokes. He can refer you out to anybody that is knowledgeable on this base.
Yeah.
Right? So what's going on? How sure are you? Number 2, what treatment options are available? And then decision number 3, or question number 3, which of these treatment options suits me as an individual, as a person with preferences and things I think are important at this time? So if you had a groin injury...
It has to make sense for you.
Yes. If you had a groin injury for 1 week, you might go for the rest and see what happens. But if you have the same groin injury for a year, you're like, we're going to get it done right now.
Yeah. And the summary for me also in terms of injury and my background as a coach is I think it's important to get back into the gym in terms of moving also in another direction for the mental side.
Yeah, so for you as a complete person.
Yes, to just get some moving in, to get some sweat in, to kind of don't lose that rhythm, because we all know if you get out of it, the longer you wait, the harder it is to get back. I think prioritizing thing that you feel is fun is important. So being injured is not fun. So if you compensate at least with doing stuff, if you like biceps curls, go at it. If you like something else, do whatever you think is fun, that you still can do. I talked about the Brent Fikowski example. Like, find something else to have a goal about. Do that if that's possible. And I also think it's very important to get moving quickly. Sitting home looking at the wall is killing me. And find someone you trust that can help you.
Yeah. And then if you ask them those 3 questions, what's going on, what treatment options are available, what should I do, this person, this moment right now, you set yourself up for success.
Yes. And if you're close to Tadeusz, I would ask him.
Maybe, right?
Not
But
me.
Yeah, you don't have to ask me. Find somebody that can help you. If you find somebody that is shit sure of everything, you should probably question it.
Yes, I would find somebody else.
A good coach or a good healthcare provider says, I don't know, I'm not so sure.
Yes.
Those are the ones to look for.
Good stuff. Okay.
Think so.
Thank you for listening.
See you next time.
Nerd Safari.